Continuing conversation with former presidential speechwriter Craig Smith. Craig, you were making the point during commercial break of the difference between a written speech and an oral delivery of a speech. You used the word orality of it. Tell us that distinction.
Well, you hear a speech and it's invisible. And so speakers have to insert poetic lines and repetition so that the ideas stick. If you read an op-ed piece in the LA Times, for example, you can take your time as you read it. You can go back to the top. You can start over. You can't do that with a speech. It becomes invisible. I mean, look at Julian Castro's keynote speech. He knew how to phrase things so they stick in your mind. He said, "Dream is universal, but America makes it reality. Investment in opportunity today to create prosperity tomorrow." Those are memorable lines because they rhyme, they have a nice balance to them. Another point he said, you can't be pro-business unless you're pro-education. So when you're doing something that's oral, you have to find a way to get it to sit in the mind of the listener. Franklin Roosevelt was very good at that.
And sometimes you read something on paper and it's okay, but then you hear it delivered by the right speaker and it becomes powerful.
Yes.
And now you wrote for President Ford and also for President Bush.
Senior.
You have to know your client, I guess, when you write. You have to write because you're imagining their speaking style when you're writing the words.
Well, right, and you don't write into a speech a word that your candidate can't pronounce. That becomes one of the keys to speech writing at a very fundamental level. But you try to find out what venue works for the candidate. You try to find out what language they're comfortable with. We were able to pump up Gerald Ford's style a little bit, make him a little more eloquent because he was comfortable with that. He had a kind of high tenor delivery, which wasn't the best baritone like a Nixon, for example. So you work with all of those things.
Well, let's turn to the Democratic Convention. Give us your take.
Well, I already talked about why I liked the keynote address by Julian Castro, but the person who hit the ball out of one of the many home runs of the Democratic Convention was Michelle Obama. When she talked about herself being the mom in chief, one of the smart things about that well-delivered speech, well-written speech, was she appealed to military voters, which the Democrats need. And the phrase, "we'll always have your back," was a terrific moment.
And she seemed to be absolutely glowing up there, radiant.
Oh, she was on. She was very, very much on, and they had written for her some very good lines, and she used rhythm and repetition in such a way as to really, move the speech down the road. And I particularly liked near the end where she had this if-then kind of hypothetical, where she said, if we can do all of this, surely we can do all of this. If we can put a man on the moon, then we can do this. And that was very effective in her speaking.
And then, of course, night two, Bill Clinton hit it out of the park.
He did, and he had a very interesting romance with the teleprompter. And he does this all the time. The speech would go along, and then he would go off on a riff, and they would stop the teleprompter, and they didn't know how long he was going to go off on his riff, and then he would come back and go right back into the teleprompter. And he did this several times, and that's why he was somewhat overtime.
But it makes it that personal connection. I mean, no one in America quite has his capacity to bond and deliver. And he seems to me, I mean, he's a very bright guy, Yale Law School and all, takes complicated stuff, simplifies it, and then presents it in a folksy way where he was answering with facts or alleged facts each of the Republican critiques of the Obama administration.
Absolutely, and he says it so naturally and so fluently that he's just totally believable and has all this credibility.
Okay, so we shift to night three.
Night three was very interesting. Joe Biden is nominated to be the Vice President of the United States and comes forward. In the first part of the speech, he's yelling like crazy, which was hard on your hearing. And then he set out his theme. He said, I learned the enormity of Barack Obama's heart, and he learned the depth of my loyalty. And so the team thing was set out early, and then he went into an attack on Mitt Romney, which is his job as the vice president, to be the bulldog that goes after the other person. But I found the most objectionable part of the speech for me was when he started dancing on bin Laden's grave and went into this whole revenge thing. I mean, he was just dripping with revenge. And I thought that that was beneath his office. I think that's beneath America to do that kind of thing. Claim you did a competent thing, you had justice carried out.
Yes.
But to go on in a vengeful way, I thought weakened the ticket.
And then, of course, the piece de resistance.
And then Barack Obama came out. He talked about Biden being his loyal friend.
Now, was there some issue of loyalty? They're both mentioning it. Is there some backstory here?
There have been a number of reports that they are actually quite close and that Biden advises him, and I think they just decided to put it out there and make it a plus, that people admire loyalty. It's one of the virtues that we love truth and we love loyalty. And I
Because there had some talk about ditching
Absolutely.
Biden from the ticket,
Absolutely.
and maybe that was to put that to rest.
I think so. I think you're exactly right. There was a lot of talk about that if this was going to be a close race, Obama would dump Biden and put Hillary on the ticket or somebody else, and he didn't do it. Okay. And it is a close race.
Okay, in the last minute we have, give us your take on the president.
Well, he talked about moving America forward. He said, we're making things again. He talked about Made in America. He talked about all the different kinds of energy programs that he would advance. It was a workmanlike speech, but I didn't think it rose to the level of Clinton or his wife. In terms of an out-of-the-park kind of speech.
Tough acts to follow.
Tough acts to follow. And he didn't do it in Denver either. So 4 years ago he didn't give a very good acceptance speech, or one that was as dramatic as some of his campaign rhetoric.
Okay. Well, in the next segment, we're going to talk about the debates, the presidential debates, which are ongoing when the show will be airing, and we'll get our distinguished guest take on the likely outcome. Stay with us. We're back with debating expert Craig Smith. Let's talk about the presidential debates and vice presidential debates, which in this close election will play a very important role, maybe even pivotal role. Surprising to me, you said although Obama is a very good speaker, he's not the greatest debater.
In my opinion, he lost every debate he had with Hillary Clinton in the primaries. He certainly won the debates he had with McCain, but that was McCain's part. I mean, Obama just leaned on the ropes and let McCain fall apart. So I don't think of him as a great debater. Now, maybe after 4 years in the presidency, he'll be better than he was last time around.
And Romney, who is not the greatest speaker in the world, you think is a pretty good debater.
Well, he learned through the primary, and then he took on the debate coach from Liberty College, who's a good friend of mine and has coached Republicans for a long time. And suddenly you saw Romney know how to throw a jab, know how to throw a counterpunch at a Rick Santorum or a Newt Gingrich. And when he did it, they were both kind of shocked. And it was very effective. He did it in a way that didn't hurt Romney's image. He didn't look mean-spirited, but boy, he pushed it back in their faces. So I think Obama faces a big challenge. And one point I'd make about the debates, at this point in October, late September, in 1980, Ronald Reagan was behind Jimmy Carter in the polls. It wasn't until he debated Jimmy Carter at the end of October that he went ahead in the polls and then won the election. So the debates are very important.
Well, if a challenger like Romney can not only hold his own, but even best the sitting president in a debate or in debates, that would be big news.
That would be very big news. And the other thing you'll see in these lead up to the debates, and we've already seen it, is the expectation game. We don't think we're going to do that well, and then they come out better. I mean, when I was working with President Ford, we had the first debate with Jimmy Carter, and everybody thought Jimmy Carter was going to kill President Ford, and Ford won that debate. And it so exceeded expectations that he jumped up to even in the polls.
Vice presidential debates. Joe Biden, who is a bright guy but has the problem of endless speaking and going off on tangents, against Ryan, who is a policy wonk and very well versed. How's that going to come out?
I think that Paul Ryan is probably the best debater out there. I think he knows how to make his points. He knows how to make them succinctly and sincerely. I think Joe Biden tends to go toward the emotional, toward the romantic side of things. You know,
he has a killer smile, though.
He has a killer smile, but sometimes it looks like he flips a switch, you know, for that smile to pop onto his face. So I think that's going to be a very interesting debate to watch. But when presidential candidates are healthy, the vice presidential debate doesn't matter much. Look at the Quayle debate. Quayle did not do well in his debate against Senator Benson. It did not affect the poll data at all. Bush went on and won despite Quayle's performance.
So it's the presidential debates that are key.
They're key unless your candidate is old. Like McCain would have become the oldest elected president, and so we cared about Sarah Palin's performance.
And in your column in our magazine, you mentioned that that Palin's less than stellar performance really hurt because people were saying, well, what happens if this guy dies?
That's right. That's right. And I don't think anybody's going to be saying that about Romney or Obama. So I think the vice presidential debate could have some fireworks, but I don't think they're going to matter very much.
So unless there's a real screw up, it's kind of off the table. Well, let's, in the last minute or two that we have in this segment, Craig, just talk about the importance of words. I mean, you're a speechwriter, you're a prolific author here on campus. The importance of words.
Well, what you want is something that somebody will remember. You know, when George H.W. Bush talked about a kinder, gentler nation, that stuck in the consciousness of the American public. When Franklin Roosevelt said, the only thing we have to fear is fear itself, it stuck in the American consciousness. Notice very simple words, not big words, but the rhythm and the simplicity and that it captures an idea is very important.
And as a professional speechwriter such as yourself, it must be deeply satisfying to find those words for your client, for your candidate, for your president.
When it happens, it's wonderful. There is a good feeling that you've captured something in a metaphor or in a simile or in a rhythm that really tells the truth and becomes part of the American lexicon.
And somebody wrote, "Read my lips, no new taxes."
Yes. That was one of the other
that
writers.
Kind of backfired.
That was one of the other writers.
Okay.
But it certainly caught attention, and it was quoted over and over again, and even you remember it to this day.
Okay. Okay, we'll be back with the rest of our show after these messages. I'd just like to reiterate the importance of voting. Make your voice heard. Don't forget to vote on Election Day, Tuesday, November 6th. Teaching ethics, I have a little rule, Levine's Law. If you don't vote, you morally lose the right to complain. We all love to complain, so go ahead and vote. You know, hundreds of thousands of Americans have given their lives over the years to preserve the right to vote. Some of our legal immigrants coming into the country appreciate more than we do the freedoms that we have and the right to vote, because they didn't have it in the countries they came. And Craig, I know you would second the importance of voting.
Especially, I would also say watch the presidential debates and the vice presidential debates so that you're an informed voter.
Yeah, yeah. Well, our democracy's not perfect, but it's sure better than most of the systems in the world, and become part of that process. Support the candidate of your choice with your time, maybe your money, certainly with your vote, and help make democracy work.
Absolutely.
Craig, thank you for joining us.
Good to be here again.
Thank you for being with us. Please join us next week for the next edition of Straight Talk. Good night, everyone.
Straight Talk has been brought to you by Southern California Edison, the Press Telegram, and remember, Straight Talk is viewable worldwide 24/7 at straighttalktv.com.